All right, welcome back, guys. This is episode 6 of Previously Prohibited. I'm Mel here with my co-host Janine. Thank you so much
Hi.
for watching. And we wanted to, real quick, just if you are here, if you want to support us, the best thing you can do is to hit that like button, hit subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Rumble, on X now. We're up on Substack as well. So we would really appreciate the support. And yeah, let's get into it. What do we got?
So, for our stupidest or worst, I don't even know what the name is exactly, tweet of the day, um, I thought this was a good one to bring us back to Gaza, which we really can't forget about because it's
Right.
just horrific daily. Is that so? This is
Certainly not funny.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not funny. It's not at all. Do you know this guy? I've seen his stuff. He has a lot of followers, like close to 100,000, I think.
No, he's not that high. He's got like
He's not okay.
47,000.
That makes me
Yeah.
feel better, a little better.
I just looked at him the other day and I was like, I still can't believe this jerk has 47,000.
Yeah.
Because all he does is just post really hateful stuff like this. Yeah.
Yeah. And for people who are just listening, he says, whenever I'm cold or tired, I think about the people of Gaza, about how much less they have than me. Then I smile because fuck these people. And that is, I think, a particularly important thing to talk about today because there's a new, all week, there have been reports of babies freezing to death. This was a headline I saw today. I still read the New York Times, even though it's horrible, but, just for sort of general ideas of what's going on. 5 babies die from the cold in Gaza as temperatures drop. And the new Zionist talking points have been, well, there are a couple. There's first the fuck these people, who cares? And then the other is strategy has been, well, actually, like, it's not cold enough for babies to die, so this must be Pallywood. Here's an example of that. This is some account. Sorry, my screenshot's bad and I accidentally cut off the name, but there's no truth to the claim that babies are freezing to death. Absolutely none. They're a bunch of liars. And then a temperature chart showing temperatures, in the 40 to 60 range. So, Mel, why don't you explain why?
So we have to break down, hypothermia for everyone is when the core body temperature falls below 96 degrees. Babies are especially susceptible to hypothermia because their little bodies have to work so hard to keep them warm. So when you have infants living in tents with no belongings, we have to remember these people have all been driven from their homes. They're living in tents and they are, struggling to keep everyone warm. Well, then the temperature drops below 50 degrees. But then what actually happened was there was a lot of rain. The rains flooded out the tents. And, what can you do? The babies, they get too cold. They can't maintain core body temperature. And unfortunately, they pass. And this is a totally 100% preventable death. There's no excuse for it. The bombing has just, again, not stopped. In fact, this is very similar to what happened last year during Christmas. Americans are sidetracked through the holidays and whatnot. So Israel really, really ramps up the bombing. And we saw it last year. We're seeing it again this year. Especially they have gone after all of these hospitals, right? My guess is that their thinking is that the only buildings essentially left are the hospitals. And even them, I mean, they're so, most of them obviously are running on generator power and whatnot. They're barely functioning as it is. And so my guess is that they're assuming that hostages are having to be taken into these hospitals. That's the only thing I can think of. If I were to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're not just simply sadistic, right? Which I don't typically.
Yeah, I don't either.
But again, so what are they doing? They're forcing the evacuations of these hospitals. And that's where we saw just 2 days ago, this doctor out of the northern Gaza. This man is just a hero. He's I'm sorry, I'm going to pull him up real quick if you guys
I have it if you want. Yeah.
Here we go.
I think this is quickly becoming an iconic photo.
Right. So this is Dr. Hussam Safia. And
Yeah.
he is from the Kamal Adwan Hospital, and that is in northern Gaza. So this man is just incredible. His son was killed at the hospital at a hospital in October. He was targeted. There was a drone strike on the entrance of the hospital, and it killed something like, I think, 25 people. And his son actually happened to be one of them. So this man is a surgeon. He has been working every single day since the bombing campaign began last October, and he was ordered to leave this hospital 2 days ago, or actually, he was told that if he didn't get out, that they were going to bomb. I forget actually what went down, but this is actually a picture of him surrendering to the IDF
Yeah.
as he walks out, and it's so emblematic. It's a video of just kind of courage walking in, because what's happened? He's being sent to the
That
Sede Taman prison, which is where they send all of the Gaza arrestees, detainees. And the last doctor, well, not the last doctor sent there, but in July, some of you all may recall that there was a big controversy when the IDF went to go arrest reservists at this prison because they had sodomized another doctor being held there to death.
Yeah.
Um,
And there was an uproar in Israel over the arrest of these soldiers who did that.
Correct. Yes.
That was what the protests were. They weren't protesting the fact that the soldiers were raping detainees.
To death.
They were, to death. And of course, what all the Zionists say is, oh, they're all terrorists. I mean, all you have to do is they just say they're terrorists, and then everybody is supposed to not care what happens to them. First of all, that's why we have due process in civilized countries. Israel wants to call itself the only democracy in the Middle East. Well, then it has to abide by kind of like basic standards, which involve, before you visit extreme punishment on people, like keeping them in prison, they get to defend themselves, have trials, and that kind of thing. And you certainly don't rape them to death.
Correct. But
they
classify anyone who even posts, anti-Israel, anyone who posts anti-Israel messages on social media as a terrorist. I mean, the word is meaningless. They have rendered it meaningless, just the same as every other, nonsense word like anti-Semitism or racism or all of the things. They don't mean anything because it's just constantly fluid, and it's just weaponized to shut people up, right?
Exactly. And it's the same with Hamas. I mean, to the extent, some people I think they say are Hamas aren't even, but Hamas also is like a governmental entity. And so they, you can be like a garbage collector and work for Hamas. That doesn't mean that you're a terrorist. They just use that word,
right. It is, a lot like Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is also a political faction, and it has, affiliates. They had doctors and whatnot that were affiliated with Hezbollah, working in Hezbollah controlled regions, who were not part of the militant wing, not part of the military at all, but it doesn't matter. It's an easy way for them to just classify every single person in the region as a terrorist, right? And unfortunately, it works rather well.
Yes, for a lot of people. So the doctor is being abducted is sparking an uproar on Twitter. I hope that there's some diplomatic pressure coming from Western countries, although I don't expect anything anymore.
Right.
And also one thing worthy of note is I was reading about the people freezing to death in tents, especially babies. One reason is that the tents are in really bad shape because they used them last winter. So now they've had to survive 2 winters, and a lot of them are tattered babies not only have trouble with the cold, but they have difficulty regulating their own temperatures. So any parent knows, like, they're new to the world, they can't really digest things, they can't do a lot of things, and that includes regulating temperatures. So they require a lot of care in that respect. And if you're living in a tattered tent in the middle of Gaza and
it's 46 degrees outside and it rains, your child is going to have a hard time. I mean, it's not just babies, it's toddlers. It's all the way up, probably I would say, until you reach puberty, that you're going to struggle. Obviously no one as much as babies will, But yeah, it's just cruelty for the sake of cruelty. They have no plan. There were rumors about Netanyahu being diagnosed with prostate cancer. I don't know if you saw
Yeah,
that. He had
I
to
did.
undergo emergency
Yeah.
surgery. So that actually even makes everything so much worse because who's steering the ship now,
Yeah.
right?
Well, he's saying they're saying that's not true, and it's just
Okay.
a benign situation, and he's having his prostate removed. I don't
I hope
even.
it's not true at all. I want to see
I
him stand trial for war crimes. So I genuinely
well,
hope he's in great health, to be quite honest with
you're
you.
optimistic. I don't think that he ever will stand trial for war crimes. I mean,
Well,
look, it's not a small thing. He can't go to Poland. I don't think we ever talked about that. He wanted to go to Poland for
right.
the
Yeah. No.
Memorial Holocaust ceremony, and he can't because Poland said they would arrest him. And that's pretty symbolic, I think, in many ways. So
It's kind of interesting because, the Russians liberated Auschwitz in January of, I guess it was 45. So it'll be 80 years next month. And they're going to, of course, have a big ceremony and whatnot. And of course, Putin can't go because of the obvious. And now, yeah, Netanyahu will not be able to go because they said that they will, because Poland is a signatory to the Rome Statute. So they said they will enforce the law and they will arrest him. And so that is, God bless
yeah,
Poland for that, for sticking
yeah.
to their guns on that.
Yeah, because not all countries are. So, I mean, first that you have the United States, who's like, basically saying they're going to punish countries who are going to enforce the warrant, which is just absolutely atrocious. And then you have France, initially said they were
Right.
going to enforce it and then clearly caved to pressure because then they said they wouldn't. So, kudos to the countries that are
Right,
strong
but
enough.
to be quite honest with you, I do not see him ever traveling to France, even though they said they
Yeah.
wouldn't enforce it. I just don't think that the French people would tolerate it. I think they're
Yeah.
gonna. I think very soon. Their options as far as traveling goes are going to be strictly limited to essentially the
Yeah.
U.S. Even Canada said,
Yeah.
Trudeau said that they
Yep.
would enforce it
Yeah.
if the Canadians elect Pierre, whatever,
Yeah.
LaPierre or whatnot, it might change, but I doubt it. I think
Yeah.
his options are going to be limited to the U.S. and that's about it,
Yeah. Well,
as they
at
should
least
be.
yeah, exactly. At least he can't go on many vacations. So there's that.
Yeah.
Of course, he deserves far worse than that. Well, I don't want to say what I think he deserves exactly. It's not very nice of me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think probably most people listening to this will agree, or at least understand
Yeah.
nonetheless. But yeah, we respect the rule of law around here. We respect international law, and
Yeah.
so definitely want to keep an eye on that. Advocating. I don't know if you saw Anthony Blinken came out yesterday, or the State Department, excuse me, came out, and Blinken was giving a speech somewhere. I don't even know where, talking about the rules of international law and protections for human rights.
Yeah.
And it was just so rich coming from him,
He's
that to the point where I was like, you're shameless. You have no shame whatsoever.
yeah,
You
no
people
shame.
have enabled the worst humanitarian crisis in the last 80 years, essentially. And you still think you get to lecture others about human rights. I will
Yeah. I
never
mean,
forgive you for ceding America's every last shred of our moral high ground, to ever lecture anyone again.
yes. I mean, it's sociopathic. And the more I think about it, I realize that you really can't be successful in this country, and maybe not in this world, whether in terms of power or money or both, unless you really don't have any morals. And what that
Right.
means is that the people with a lot of power are the ones who are really sociopathic. And that just creates a really bad situation where we have what you've seen today. And at the end of the year, I think like a lot of people get very reflective. And I've been thinking a lot about the past year. And I mean, I don't think I'll ever see humanity the same again. I did. If you told me a year and a half ago that America would enable what is clearly a genocide, cover for it, that so many people who I liked and respected would be justifying this and saying that the most ridiculous excuse is that it's Hamas's fault these children are freezing to death
Right.
or they're not free. I would never have believed you. I did think that there was a red line, and I thought that people had learned something from history. Something. It turns out nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. I mean, for me, most of that was shattered during COVID. I could not
Yeah.
believe the lengths that people would go to. Their selective, what they would believe from government, what they wouldn't believe from government,
Yeah.
the excuses that they would make, the way that they would go out of their way to punish their fellow human the second that they had just a little tiny bit of power over them. We saw just kind of like the worst of people come out. And but again, yeah, we kind of built this dissonant coalition, right? That
Yeah.
no, we're not like that.
Yeah.
We're not going to blindly trust the government. We're not going to blindly trust the narrative that they're pushing on us. And unfortunately, you saw just kind
The,
of that small tiny percentage of people, maybe 2 or 3% of people who really stuck to our guns, like day oneers. That's what
yeah.
I always call us.
Yeah.
Of them, about 85% fell right lockstep right into
Right.
into believing everything that a foreign government says, not
Right,
even
right.
our own.
Yeah. I it's so I would say COVID was like a huge turning point for me because for the reasons you said. I saw sort of, I think a lot of people react out of fear, and as someone who was more on on the liberal side and certainly surrounded by friends and family on the liberal side, the people who I thought were rational sort of succumbed to fear and propaganda, what was obvious to me. And so that was a shock. And then I thought I found this group of people who were
Yeah,
rational and saw through propaganda and had, were humane, would put like children, before.
right.
And so it was sort of a double whammy. And then I thought it was these very people who I had trusted during the COVID era who I saw become the most vicious, the most inhumane,
Right.
the most irrational, the most fear driven. It was that plus it just struck me as worse than what I saw during COVID. I mean, during COVID, I
Right.
didn't see people wishing death on children or excusing death for children
Right.
on the grounds of ethnicity or something like that. So it was sort of like this has brought me further to the edge of really having no further in terms of falling off the cliff of just having
Mhm.
no faith in humanity.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was like, we were still advocating for their children, even children like the children of the
Yes.
libs who were like COVID insane. We were
Yeah.
like, no, this is wrong that their
Yeah.
parents are doing this.
Yeah.
These children should not suffer because their parents
Yes.
are
Yes.
delusional. Okay,
Yes.
we need to stand up for them. We have to reopen the schools. We have to ensure that these children, because again, we saw their parents as crazy, and we saw their
Yeah.
children as victims of their parents. And now, again, that just all went out the window, and people see these children as just as culpable in
What do
some
you
instances.
what do you think explains the difference? Like to me, I think a lot of it is just bigotry. It's anti-Arab bigotry. I think these people
Yeah.
cannot see Arabs as humans, and that includes children. Um, and I think that's fundamentally what's at the root of it. What's your take?
I think it's anti-Muslim.
Yeah.
I think it's more. I don't think people consciously think Arab. I think they
Yeah.
absolutely think Muslim, and there's just a strong anti-Muslim sentiment in this country. It's kind of bizarre because there actually are a lot of Muslims in the country. As far
Yeah.
as Jews go, I mean, there's I think almost as many Muslims as there are Jews, and
Oh,
yet
really? Yeah.
so few people have any interactions with Muslims that.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. They just don't have the. When I say lobby, I'm just saying like they don't have the same familiarity with. Americans don't have the same familiarity with them, and it's just like this foreign culture that they're all scared of.
Yeah.
And you got to think like we were subjected after 9/11 to about a decade worth
Of
of this really
propaganda. Yeah.
weird propaganda, and then they kind of try to pull it back some, and then you do have a lot of cultural clashes,
Yeah.
especially in the West in general. Like over in Britain they have issues, and and it's not to say that Muslims are perfect by any means. Obviously
No.
there's a lot of, there are extremists, and they do some really crazy, really crappy things. Obviously, like the France attacks and whatnot. I think
Yeah.
about like that's like a big one. And so it's not like it's totally unfounded by any means, but it gets what we see, and we saw this with the market, or with the Christmas market
Yes.
attack, is that when something like that happens, it gets blown up, right?
Yeah.
It's this huge event, as opposed to like a white kid going into a Walmart, and gunning. I mean, it's kind of a big deal, but it doesn't get carried over into like
No,
larger cultural implications the way
exactly.
that when a Muslim does it. And so,
I mean, that there had been a school shooting by a white kid a few
right,
days
like
earlier. I don't know
yeah,
if you remember,
yeah,
and that doesn't
uh
like
huh,
spark these conversations. But and like I'm not a Muslim. My father was raised Muslim, but he's not practicing at all. I'm not like I'm not a huge fan of,
right,
certainly not some of the more extreme cultural practices, but I think this idea that Muslims are uniquely violent is really a problem. It's not, I don't think it's true. I think a
right.
lot of
I
it
agree.
ultimately stems from resentment at Western intervention. If you're
Right,
if you live in, you know, many Arab countries, your familiarity with the West is mostly like driven
being
by the fact
bombed.
that their bombs are being dropped on you.
Right,
Like you're not going to like the country that's doing that to you.
right.
And of course,
Yeah.
that gets wrapped up. Like if you have a certain ideology, when you talk about these issues, it'll get wrapped up in the way you talk about it. So a lot of it can
Hmm.
sound like it's religious, but I think it also ultimately stems from um, our history of intervention in the region.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have bad actors that are going to cloak their bad deeds in religious, rhetoric
Right.
in order to excuse themselves, and we see it across the board. And right now, I actually don't know if it's more prevalent in the Muslim religion or not, because it's hard to differentiate, right,
Yeah.
between because, like I said, those instances always get blown up, and so it kind
Yeah.
of throws your frame of reference. But regardless, like I said the other day, I try not to draw grand conclusions from lone wolf acts. This isn't
Yeah.
the action of a state. Now, of course, if it was state sponsored, that's different, and that you can draw wider conclusions from that. And so, but again, these are, um, and perhaps that's taking us back to Gaza,
Yeah.
Hamas, and whatnot, is of course 17 years ago they held one election. Hamas got 40 something percent of the vote, so they've been in charge of Gaza ever since. I guess it's
Yeah.
18 years now,
Yeah.
but
And
uh,
50%, more than 50% of the people in Gaza weren't even born when that election was held. So the
correct,
idea that
right.
they, yeah. Um,
Right. And I get so upset because they say, well, they should have overthrown their government. And then we can get into the fact, well, okay, how do you overthrow a government when
yeah.
it is extremely well funded because the psychopaths next door want them in power because
Yeah.
it allows them to treat the entire population as a terrorist population, essentially. And so they ensure always, they never once, Israel never once demanded any kind of democratic restrictions on the flow of money. I've always wondered, like, well, why wouldn't you just demand that? Okay, in order to get this aid, you have to hold new elections. You have to
Yeah.
reaffirm your why not? Like, that just seems like such an easy solution. But of course, we know the answer to that is that they didn't want the
Yeah.
Palestinians to have any kind of unity or ability to represent as anything other than terrorists on the international stage.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's pretty clear that that's the situation, and they just recycle the same, propaganda, the same lines again, that they elected Hamas and they withdrew from
Right,
Gaza in 2005, so it's not under an occupation, but it's actually worse than an occupation because they've
right,
sealed off the borders. Gaza can't thrive economically, so it's a
right,
really desperate place. You can't travel. A lot of people can't get the treatment they need, medical treatment they need. Can't,
right.
go to
You
school in
can't
another
take
place.
your
Yeah.
your fishing boat out past 300 yards. You'll get blown
Yeah.
out of the water. It's the only
Uh,
place in the world where people can't even flee by sea. Which
yeah,
is,
and
I remember the first time I heard that, or and really thinking about it, it was so wild,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. It's and then obviously, I'm not excusing terrorism. I'm always against violence against innocent people, but
Right.
when they protest, they get shot. When people in America try to boycott divestment and sanctions, you're anti-Semitic. They try to shut you down. In fact, in a lot of states, we can probably do a whole episode on this sometimes. Sometime you aren't allowed to boycott Israel. You literally
Right.
have to take a loyalty oath if you want to be employed by the state or contract
Mhm.
with the state, which is total First Amendment violation because the state can't condition, benefits based upon you are espousing a certain viewpoint.
Right.
So just so they can't. we all agree terrorism is bad, violence is bad, but then
Right.
peaceful forms of protest are also, they make sure that
Prohibited,
doesn't
shut
prohibited.
down. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So Palestinians are just supposed to take it year after year after year, and it's culminated in
Yeah.
this, I would say.
Well, you're so sweet because you're on the left, and you guys always
Well,
say that. But I come from the right, where we flag Gadsden flags and say the trees of liberty must be watered with the blood of tyrants from time to time. It is what it is. And so obviously, I think there's better ways to conduct yourself than what was done on 10/7. I still think that 10/7 was a total setup and that it was allowed to happen. And I do think that they kind of foolishly walked into that. Um, uh, I know that's going to tick a lot of people off, but I don't care. And so, uh, yeah, it is what it is. It happened. Regardless, we're a year out now, and it is zero justification for what is still continuing to go on. And more so, it is zero justification for the US to continue our unabetted, the limitless
yes,
support, you
yes.
know?
Well, we'll see if Trump changes things when he takes office in a few short weeks. And before we end, I did want to say just a brief word about Jimmy Carter, because he died yesterday at the age of
Yeah, yeah.
100. And I think Mel and I were chatting about this. We agree we're too young, believe it or not, to
No.
have been around during his presidency.
Yep.
So, I don't think I'm I know lots of people who have strong opinions both ways about his record, but as a post-president, I've admired him a lot. I read his book Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid, probably 15 years ago or so.
Okay.
He was a great, and he didn't do what most former presidents do, which is try to make a lot of money.
Hmm.
Instead, he actually really tried to do some good in the world, and he cared a lot about the situation in Israel, Palestine, and one reason he was allowed to speak honestly about it was he wasn't dependent on corporate donors and that kind of thing, which is hard if you want to criticize Israel.
Right.
So lots of respect to him, and he will be missed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Really a great humanitarian. Definitely.
Yeah.
I was telling Janine that I'm probably one of the only people in America that doesn't have a real strong opinion on him either way. I think, some good, some bad, meh, I don't
Yeah.
think he was the terrible person that he was made out to be very often by Republicans.
Yeah.
But I do think that there, are definitely legitimate gripes there as well. But regardless, let's move on to
Yes.
India.
Yes.
We are back. Oh,
Yeah.
are you gonna pause? Go.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it. Okay. Let
Okay.
me also wait. What was the when a no, my
Are you
memory
gonna
is
do the
just I'm
fuck your
like, what
face?
was the yeah, do you want me to start with
Yeah.
that or do you want
Yeah.
to
Let's start with it.
okay.
Yeah.
What is that? You want me to pull it up now or do you want to say something first? Yeah. Why don't I'll just say yeah. You say quickly that we're switching topics, then I'll pull it up. That
Okay.
works.
All right. So switching topics to India. Well, really back to the great H1B1 wars of 2024. We have this gem from old Elon Musk. Mr. Musk started out on Christmas Day, and he went pretty much 48 hours straight, just balls to the wall the whole time, kind of fighting over these H-1B visas. And this was kind of the apex, the culmination. It all led up to this tweet right here. For those of you guys listening, the reason I'm in America, along with so many critical people who built SpaceX, Tesla, and hundreds of other companies that made America strong, is because of H-1B. Take a big step back and fuck yourself in the face. I will go to war on this issue, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend. So he tweeted that one out at 11:22 p.m. on the 27th.
Maybe he had been drinking.
Yeah, there might have been a little bit of alcohol involved in that one. And so for those who don't know, and I'm pretty sure that's about 99% of America, that second part, the F yourself in the face part, that is actually a quote from the movie Tropic Thunder Do you remember that
I have
movie?
not. I haven't seen it.
It's actually, I love it. It's hilarious. But it is about these actors. It's got Robert Downey Jr. It was really controversial at the time because he did blackface. But they
Oh,
go into the Vietnam, or they go to Vietnam to film this Vietnam movie, or this movie about the Vietnam War, and they get kidnapped by a guerrilla force, right? And so uh, Tom Cruise plays this guy, Lex Friedman, I think it is. He's supposed to be like your stereotypical Jewish agent or Jewish studio owner, right? So he's like got all of the gold, and he's kind of just Harvey Weinstein-ish, right?
yeah.
But he's total cut your throat at the end of the day. Like if you F with his business, with his movies, he will end you, right? And it's
Yeah.
really funny, but that's the part he's like yelling at somebody on the phone. He's
That's
yelling at one of
funny.
the gorillas, or one of the gorilla group members, telling them that if you don't give me my actors back, and so but again, nobody got it.
Yeah.
Like nobody understood it. Nobody knew where that came from.
Well, probably
And
everyone's too young and on Twitter.
well, even I don't know, it's so funny. Like I knew it right away just because I've seen that movie like 100 times, and I think it's hilarious. It's so funny. But everybody else was like freaking out because so what, again, let's refresh everybody's memory. This all started with the announcement of Trump is going to bring this guy Saram Kusham, I believe it is, on as the A1 or as the AI advisor. This guy had previously advocated for kind of removing the caps on H-1B visas, right? He wanted to expand it infinitely. He says we can bring in more engineers, and then that will grow all the businesses more. And so people were upset that this guy was going to be advising Trump on AI because, of course, as AI grows, they're going to need more coders to come in. And the worry is that he will whisper in Trump's ear, we need more H-1B visas, which a lot of Americans are extremely opposed to because, number one, the system is ripe for abuse. It does get abused. There's if you go on X right now, there are dozens and dozens of posts of people combing through the H-1B database online, and you can see where they've all been awarded. and these things are being issued for store clerks, like working at 7-Eleven cashiers.
Yeah. Wow.
Graphic designers.
Yeah.
It's not just coders. It's not just jobs. Chippendales applied for H-1B visas, apparently, for their strippers, their male strippers.
Because for people who don't know, it's supposed to be like, unique skills that you can't just get in America.
Right. It's supposed to be the idea behind it is that you can't find an American to fill the job, so you have to go abroad, right?
Yeah.
But the whole concept, though, is we only give these out when there are no Americans for the job. But of course, over the years, just like anything else, it's been used and abused by corporations to bring in really cheap labor, and it does help suppress the wages. This was kind of universally agreed upon on the right that this was an issue. Donald Trump in 2016, when he was campaigning in 2016, he flat out said that it was being manipulated by businesses. He even admitted, he said, I've done it. He said, of course I've done it. Everybody else does it. He says, but I shouldn't be allowed to do it, which
That's
I was
honest.
Yeah, I agree. And he says, it's driving down our wages, and we're going to end it. He said he was going to end it, and he didn't end it. I think he put a couple of restrictions on it, but of course Biden immediately lifted those restrictions. And Biden, that was actually, I don't know if you remember, but in 2020, right after they announced that he had taken the election, the first thing he did was say that he was going to up the H-1B visas, but surprisingly he didn't. But that was his first announcement. So it kind of set off a storm, obviously, on X. People were going insane, and it really showed the rift, I think, on the right between the populist right, which is kind of make America great again, make America 1980s great again.
And
the tech right, quote unquote,
Mm,
which really is just, a bunch of corporatists who jumped on the Trump train once they realized that Biden was done and that Kamala
yeah.
just wasn't going to win. Um,
And they're kind of like neoliberal, like they're all kind of yeah.
Yeah, they're just for me, part of it that really upsets me, having been a lifelong Republican, having put up with a lot of really shitty Republican politicians, right? I've been through the trenches. Back when you guys were, these hardcore Dems, I was still a Republican. And now,
Yeah.
you've been in my party for what, 5 minutes, and you think you get to dictate who
Yeah.
who's allowed here and who's not. This is what happened we saw with Israel. At least then it just still kind of made a little bit more sense. It's
Yeah.
not like the Republican Party has ever been anti-Israel by any means. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just, but back in the summer there were some Jewish people that came over from the left and then said, we need to kick these anti-Israel people out of the Republican Party. I'm like,
Yeah.
calm down, okay? I've been here a
Yeah.
lot longer than you.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's
yes,
part of the whole realignment that's taking place. I think where like traditional right and left aren't really or Republican Democrat aren't really the right ways to look at it anymore.
well, right, because
Yeah.
it's what it's really boiling down to is just going to be a class war, right? At the end
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
day, and nobody wants to talk about that, and even kind of hinting at class issues in the U.S. is, to some people, it's tantamount to, you're a communist. I mean,
Right.
there are a lot of people in the U.S. that get really, really uncomfortable just talking about basic realities about our class system and about wealth gaps and things like that. But that's what it's going to come down to. And I thought
Yeah.
what was interesting was with the Luigi Mangione thing, is how many people on the right who apparently, who kind of sided with him or at least empathized with him. I don't think you'll
Yeah.
find many people say like what he did was right, but they will say, I can understand it, which
Yeah.
should scare the crap out of these corporatist
Yeah.
billionaires,
Well, I think it does. I mean, is it so? My interpretation is of the reason Trump won in 2016 was it was a class issue. It was
Yeah.
basically, mainly white, but not entirely white, working class people being like the Democrats,
Mhm.
which used to be the party of the working class, have been ignoring our needs. They've become sort of the
Right.
party of the educated elites,
Yep.
and I think that's absolutely true. And although Trump can be crass and says a number of things I don't agree with, I think he at least taps into or is responsive to what's going on with the working class in this country, which and the
Right.
middle class, frankly, which is really
Right.
bad. I mean, people are not living the way that they have been able to, a decent standard of living. If you go to these like small towns between big cities, when I look at them, they're so decrepit. Things are falling apart.
Yep.
There are homeless people everywhere.
Yep.
Like it's
Oh yeah, people have legitimate complaints
yes,
with the state of the country. The total kind of consolidation of all industry into these monopolies and duopolies. The way that it just kind of they prey all of the corporatism that preys on the American middle and lower classes. People have very legitimate grievances. And yeah, Trump really tapped into that, especially in 2016. He didn't
yeah,
necessarily fulfill a lot of that, but he did actually
yeah,
do some good things that he doesn't credit for. I won't go into all of that right now, but so I think people have a genuine they seem to have a feeling like, hey, at least he gets it, right?
yeah,
He's a billionaire, but he
it,
understands what's wrong. He does understand the problem. And so you saw that, this time around there were a lot more people from a wider base, a
yeah,
demographic base, that were willing to go back to him and
yeah,
or to back him. And so we definitely saw that, especially with Hispanics. That was kind of wild.
absolutely,
I think
yeah,
he actually drew almost as many Hispanic males as he did white males, which is
yeah.
insane. You know?
Yeah, well, yeah, and the liberal elites, like, I mean, they just shock me with their absolute inability to learn anything. It's like year after year, they do the same thing, like Hillary Clinton calling the Trump base
Yeah.
deplorable in 2016. And then, I mean, the things that Kamala, Bill Clinton, Tim Walz are talking about.
Yeah.
And they're focused on these issues like transgender issues. I mean, you know,
As if
this,
anybody, yeah. But what's fascinating is, so now these H-1B visa things, like this debate has come out, right? And it gets really heated really fast, and there is a lot of racism getting thrown at each
yeah,
side, kind of stereotypical stuff. The Indians are calling the white people stupid, fat, and lazy. The white people are calling the Indians, street hitters, and
yeah,
and which is really bad. I mean, we probably
the,
shouldn't say that, I mean, but that's pretty much was the worst thing that was being
yeah,
said. And I don't know if that's any worse than calling someone low IQ, lazy loser.
yeah, no,
Which I saw plenty of.
yeah,
And what did we see with the tech bros? They come out and they accuse everyone who was opposed to this as being racist. This is just about
right,
racism. You guys are just
right,
racist. And it's like, did you not learn a single lesson from the Democrats? Do you
yeah,
think we give a flying if you call us racist? We
yeah,
don't. We've been
yeah,
called racist for 8 years. It doesn't change anything, okay? We
yeah,
have legitimate grievances, and no, we're right here on this. That you guys, and what's really wild is Elon will be like, he was trying to, I think, make nice last night. He came in and he was like, yeah, it is being abused, because somebody wrote this really great thread. They dug through all of the data, they made all of these charts, and they were showing. The guy said, actually, I went into digging into this data. His name is Robert Sterling. He said, I went into the data thinking one thing, and I came out thinking something
mm,
very, very different. No, this system is being grotesquely abused, and it needs to stop. And so Elon jumps in and he offers up he says, okay, you're right, I agree. Um, but everybody seems to agree that the system is being abused. And I'm like, okay,
yeah,
well, if we can pull this abuse out, do you really need to up the numbers? Right?
yeah,
It's like they don't want to actually fix the problem. And then something else
yeah,
real quick that I thought was interesting, and I'm gonna dig into this more, is what surfaced in this Robert Sterling, this guy's thread, is that there are these massive, essentially farms, right? They are these companies that's all they do is H-1B visas. They're all Indian companies.
mm,
So just so people know,
yeah.
India accounts for something about 75% of all H-1B visas every
Oh,
year.
wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's between 70 and 75%.
Mm,
So and this has been for well over, I think, going on 2 decades now. So this is
mm,
a ton of, I mean, they have a serious monopoly on the system. And then so it's like India, then China gets about 12%, and then the rest of the
mm.
world gets whatever's left over.
Wow.
And yeah, and so, but what has happened is that they figured out how to game the system. So these massive uh companies, these Indian companies, they come in, they fill out all of the H-1B visa applications for people. They get paid by the person in India, sends, I don't know,
Mm,
$10,000. They fill out their application. They know all of the right buzzwords, all of the keywords that are going to trip up uh, the feeder that their
yeah,
applications will get sent through. And then once that application is approved, then these people, right? So the H-1B visa gets administered to, I don't know, the blue company. The blue
uh-huh.
company then farms these workers out. But the blue company, the ones who actually submitted the application, they're the ones who technically control the employment
Wow.
of
Huh.
these immigrants. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Huh.
And so it's really wild.
Yeah.
And it's definitely ripe for corruption. And apparently somebody was tweeting about a lot of these applicants, like their credentials are totally fabricated.
Mm,
They're just making up stuff. But the
yeah.
companies know what to say to get the
Huh.
visas, and if you pay the right amount, you can get it. So again, it comes down to, should Americans have to compete with the rest of the world
Right.
for American jobs? And of course, I am vehemently against that.
Yeah.
No, you know, we shouldn't.
Yeah.
that's not free market.
No, we should be investing in our
Yeah.
own people.
Right.
That's
Right.
yeah.
I'm not some kind of free market absolutist
Yeah.
whatsoever. You know, and if we're gonna go, and I was talking to somebody earlier about this because Elon kept tweeting out all these like Milton Friedman videos. Who Milton Friedman is the godfather of the
Yeah.
Chicago School of Economics, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, you know, what's funny is they always love to tweet out these libertarian takes on free markets, but they never follow through on the other part of the libertarian takes on economics, which is like no patents, no
Right.
trademarks.
Oh, yeah, right.
Copyrights are gone, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
You guys only want just one part of it where you get all your
Yeah.
free cheap labor, but you don't want to do the other part. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of we can obviously get into this more in another episode, but I find immigration a complicated issue, and
yeah.
when it comes to like, someone who's really unique and has very special skills, of course that's like something I would want to be
Right.
able to consider, but but obviously that system gets abused as we've seen because that was supposed to be the point of
Right. I
H-1Bs.
I think 85,000. I feel like we could
Yeah.
pretty much pull all of the really special people with
Yeah.
that. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not like hardcore. I understand. I'm a realist. I get it.
Yeah.
There are some jobs, you know, you want to grow, all of these things. We need to bring some people in, but you have to fix this very, very broken system first.
Yeah.
And to me, what it sounds
Agreed.
like is that you're not going to fix the system. You just want to pile on more. And
Yeah.
then when you tell me that because I don't want to work 80 hours a week, and
Yeah.
I don't want to have to compete with people willing to work 80 hours a week, which is just insane. And this is what
Yeah.
these people are brought here to do.
Yeah.
That means I'm lazy, that I want DEI,
Yeah.
that I want
Yeah.
preferential treatment, you know, which is just so insulting.
Yes.
And so we really saw Elon kind of step in it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like he kind of really damaged his reputation by shutting
Yeah.
accounts down, shutting calling people racist, you know, basically using all of the left's tactics to shut the discussion down and get his way essentially.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I was a big fan of his, and then that's quickly dissipated. I mean, it was pretty clear to me too that he was throttling pro-Palestine accounts. So, for someone who claims to be a free speech person, I mean, a lot of his posts I found to be not that. I had thought he was like a genius, and then I saw some of his tweets, and I was like, huh, this is pretty dumb.
Yeah. I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, I never engage with him because I feel like he's got so many like fanboys and haters at the exact same
Yeah.
time. Anytime I ever comment on anything he ever, and I haven't done it in years now, it doesn't matter what I say. If I say something critical, the fanboys will come and attack. If I
Yeah.
say something
Yeah.
nice, I'm getting called a bootlicker. And
Yeah.
so I mostly just ignore him. I don't like follow him. I don't think anyways. And I don't have
I
him
follow him. I'm curious. I feel like what he says, has a lot of impact, so I want to know what he's saying.
Right.
But
yeah.
yeah,
And maybe, yeah.
I think
feel like
he's
I don't
like,
see him that much. And
Oh,
I think because I kept
okay.
pushing like not interested in this tweet.
Oh yeah.
Not interested because he
I
was
mean,
just
most
posting
of
for
them
the
are
longest.
not
Right.
that interesting.
He was posting these like friggin' boomer memes, and I'm like, why does this crap still keep showing up in my thing? I didn't want to block him, so eventually it just went away. And then this is the first time he's been in my algorithm in a long time, like a lot. And I'm like, what is going on here? So he's trying to thread a needle in which he's still this kind of populist quote unquote hero or whatnot. And certainly a lot of people do see him like that. With the very real reality that he is in fact not a populist. He's a corporatist. And so we'll see. But I do think that he kind of damages his reputation, and a lot of people see him differently now. I still kind of see him the same because I never really saw him as my hero to begin with. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I guess that's where he had kind of lost me during the Palestine stuff. I had briefly sort of had a little fondness for him over his, buying Twitter and claiming it was going to be a free speech platform. And then when I quickly saw that he was actually throttling pro-Palestine speech, I was like, oh,
Right. Yeah. I
fuck
mean,
this guy. And I don't think he's a villain or a hero. He's just a person.
Right.
He's a businessman. I also don't think he's a
Right.
genius. He gets way too much credit for his intelligence. I don't think
Yeah.
he's smarter than average, but I don't think he's a genius.
Right. I mean, I cut him a little bit more slack, I think, with the Palestine stuff, just because we saw what they did with TikTok,
Yeah.
and he still lets me say whatever I want to say. And I will say that most of my Palestine stuff actually gets a lot of engagement, I feel like. So, and
Mine
of course,
doesn't, but maybe that's just, my,
I think it's the
I'd
audience
assume that's
too.
why it's, my followers are not,
Right. Yeah. If people like unfollow you, which of course I've
Yeah.
been through that many
Yeah.
a times, I mean, it was rough days at the very beginning, but again, so I'm sympathetic with him there because he still lets me say whatever I want to, as opposed to
Yeah.
like, Meta, they even
Yeah.
like shut down if you even used the word Zionists
Yeah.
out of just a very limited context.
Well,
Your
their
post was
their
flagged.
main content moderator is like a former IDF soldier who's like extreme Zionist. So,
So,
yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's some kind of Stockholm syndrome. I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel grateful that I'm not I'm not being punished for it.
It's actually an interesting point you bring up. I had never thought of it this way because, a lot of my work has been about the government sort of pressuring social media companies to censor. And what you just said was basically like you sort of think Elon may have been worried about that. That was what I took you to be implying. And so, he might have done some suppression as a result because of
More
what
so,
happened with TikTok.
I saw him
Yeah.
more so like kind of go in the kind of hardcore and the pro-Israel side.
Yeah.
As a way to, I mean, he took a freaking tour of Auschwitz with Ben Shapiro, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like taking a bullet for all of us right there. I cannot imagine having to do that.
Yeah.
I would rather gargle bleach. I'm not even lying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's puzzled me because a few times he's posted like reasonable things at the beginning and then changed his tune. And he tweeted out the Jeffrey Sachs Tucker Carlson interview, which was like highly critical of Israel, said it was an interesting interview. That really surprised me. So I don't quite know what to make of him on the issue.
Right. Yeah. I actually, so, I kind of thought, well, he's kind of playing this, he'll be super pro Israel, but he still lets everybody else, criticize all they want. And so I'll take it. Again, I didn't ever expect him to be some kind of, Palestinian hero or anything like that. So, but yeah, so regardless, he kind of, just to me, with the shutting down on some accounts and taking away blue checks, hopefully they'll come back. I do think that, but to me, it's a little bit petty, kind of flexing his muscle.
It's
like
very petty.
Yeah. Just a reminder that of your place, that at any time I want to, I can shut you up, kind of thing.
And that's not real free speech, right? That's like, I mean, that's kind of the antithesis of actual free speech. That's letting you know that if you cross certain boundaries, you're gonna not have your voice anymore. On that note,
we will watch it.
Should we? Yeah. Lots of interesting things, and as the new year, the year turns over, we'll be doing another episode.
Yes. Going into next year, hopefully
2025.
I know. Do you have any New Year's resolutions?
I do. I will only say one of them, though. I'll tell you the other one after we start recording. One of them is to be on Twitter less.
Okay, that's a good one. That's always a good one. Yeah.
How about you?
No, probably. I know that should be my New Year's resolution, right? But no, my New Year's resolution is to figure out technology.
That's a good one.
I don't know anything. There's so much stuff that when I'm looking up stuff for our podcast, I don't understand any of this terminology. That's my focus. I've got a whole list of things that I have to look up and understand, figure it out. So I guess that's a New Year's resolution.
I feel like what happens as people get older is they like stop keeping up, and then you're like, then you're really out of it by the time you're 60, 70, like are most people's parents.
Right.
So
well, I never cared
that's a
to
good
begin
resolution.
With, so.
I'm the same. My mom is a computer programmer, so she's actually way more technologically adept than I am. It's embarrassing.
Oh, well,
I
my
hate it.
sister, my sister and her husband are both. Well, my sister is a chemical engineer by trade, but then she taught herself how to code so she could work from home.
No.
And then her husband is like this computer engineer genius. Like he runs the entire IT department for this big bank, and so they know everything, and they're always talking to me about stuff, and I'm like, um, do you not understand that the only reason I use Apple is because it's literally made for dumb people like me? Like everything is the exact same. I
I
love the
know.
uniformity across all
I mean,
devices.
my baby who's about to turn 1 has figured out how to open apps. So that's
Yeah,
easy.
yeah, exactly. That's a perfect yes. And by the time that your baby is 5, he and I will 100% be on the same level. Okay.
Well, on that note, happy New Year's, everyone,
You
and we'll
too.
see
Yes.
you in 2025.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.